Is the Canadian dollar in trouble? Well, recently we have seen the Canadian dollar heading down, and in December it has been getting hit hard relative to the US dollar. Will it continue? If we take a look at the US dollar relative to world currencies, you can see here that it's actually been going up a lot, and it's been going up fast in the month of December. And that includes against the Canadian dollar. When you see the US dollar increase this fast relative to world currencies, often the Canadian dollar lags outside of other factors. And that's exactly what's been taking place. One of the factors you want to take a look at in trying to value the Canadian dollar relative to the US dollar is the price of oil and the direction that it's moving in. When the price of oil is increasing, that tends to help us support a stronger Canadian dollar because Canada is a net exporter of oil. And if it's going down, that tends to put downward pressure on the dollar. Well, if you take a look at the price of oil, which is the second graph here, here's West Texas Intermediate crude. It's really been flat over the last few months. But look at the Canadian dollar relative to the US dollar. It's been heading lower. So the price of oil hasn't helped Canada here. There are a few other factors you want to look at in trying to determine the value of the Canadian dollar. One is the difference in interest rates, especially around the 2-year yield. What we've seen is the yield in the US rising, and we're not seeing the same response on the Canadian side. And so that differential tends to go against the Canadian dollar because the US interest rates are moving higher. Another factor is the Canadian economy's strength. Right now, it's quite benign. It's not very strong at all. It's suffering. And the U.S. economy continues to be one of the strongest economies in the world, and that differential is hurting Canada's forecast. Canada also right now has some political turmoil, and investors don't like uncertainty. And right now there's a lot of uncertainty, especially since we have a new administration coming into the U.S. and having to deal with some of the issues like tariffs. We really have been all over the map, and that's causing some problems. So there's really nothing positive right now in helping to support the Canadian dollar. So where are we technically with Canadian dollar relative to the US dollar? Well, we have had a pattern here recently of lower highs, which is not good for the Canadian dollar. And in fact, if you take a look here, this is the level of support around 72 cents. We've seen it bounce off of this support level a number of times. And then in December, we've seen it break down through this level and continue to slice lower below 70 cents. This line that was support is now turned into resistance because we have moved quite a bit below that level, and it might be hard to get back over 72 cents. We could see an oversold bounce where the Canadian dollar does move up, but investors should be aware that January tends to be one of the weaker months of the year for the Canadian dollar relative to the US dollar. Here's from my Thackeray's 2024 Investors Guide, and here we are in January. Here you can see the Canadian dollar on average tends to weaken, and on a median basis as well compared to the US dollar. And the frequency of outperformance for the Canadian dollar being positive is only 33% from 1990 to 2022. In other words, January tends not to be a good month for the Canadian dollar relative to the US dollar. And the US dollar tends to be strong relative to world currencies as well, as we tend to see a whole bunch of new orders start to be settled once again in the US dollar currencies as the new year starts. Right now, there's not very much positive about the Canadian dollar. Maybe we do find a bottom here, but there's not a lot going for it at this time.